The wind outside howled like something alive, thrashing through the tall pine trees that wrapped around the small wooden cabin like guardians. Inside, a man worked in silence by the fireplace. His name was Silas Ward, though no one had spoken it in 3 long years. Not since he disappeared into these mountains with nothing but grief on his back and guilt in his chest. His hands moved slowly, stitching a worn boot with careful precision, the leather stiff and cracked from the cold. He hadn't spoken a word aloud in months. Sometimes he wondered if his voice even still worked. Rain slammed against the roof. The shutters rattled, but the cabin stood strong. Silas had built every inch of it with his own hands, far away from people, noise, and memory. He'd picked this valley for its isolation. No trails marked the way up, only rock, brush, and treacherous terrain that could chew up even seasoned trappers. That was the point. He didn't want to be found. Then came a knock. Sharp, loud. Once, then again harder. It echoed through the room like gunfire. Silas froze, the needle halfway through the boot leather. Nobody came up here. Nobody even knew how. He stood slowly, heart pounding in his chest like it was trying to escape. The rifle, always loaded, leaned by the door where it stood untouched for months. The knocks came again. Multiple fists this time, slamming on the thick wood. He heard voices, rapid, desperate, and unfamiliar. The language was soft, flowing, musical in its panic. Then a cry, high-pitched and raw. A child. Silas's hand tightened on the rifle, his mind racing. He stepped closer to the door and pressed his ear to it. Rain. Wind. More voices. Then he heard her. A woman, her words foreign but her tone unmistakable. Pleading. Not just asking, begging. For help. For safety. For something only he could give. The rifle trembled slightly in his grip. He stared at the wooden bar across the door, the last piece of the wall he'd built between himself and everything outside. Opening it would mean more than letting in strangers. It would mean letting go of solitude, letting the past sneak back in through voices and eyes in need. But the crying, it sounded like his daughter had all those years ago in his final memory of her. The tightness in his chest grew unbearable. His fingers moved before his mind agreed. The bar lifted. He pulled open the door, and there they stood, 6 figures soaked in rain and fear. One woman stepped forward, holding a small child against her chest. Her dark hair stuck to her cheeks, her lips trembling from the cold. Behind her were 5 others, 3 men, 2 more women, all thin, mud-covered, exhausted. Their eyes locked on the cabin's glow. Then back to him. Hope and terror tangled in their expressions. The woman said something quickly, gesturing to the child and the others, then pressing her hands together in prayer. Silas didn't understand the words, but he understood the meaning. Please, help us. He looked past them, into the trees. Nothing yet, but something had pushed them here. Something dangerous enough to send them climbing a mountain in a storm. The child in her arms couldn't have been more than 3 years old. Lips blue, barely conscious. They wouldn't survive the night out here. Silas stepped aside. Come in, he said. His voice cracked from disuse. They rushed past him like a river breaking through a dam. And just like that, his silence was gone. The cabin filled with the sound of wet clothes, quick breathing, and quiet fear. The woman holding the child dropped to her knees near the fireplace, gently unwrapping the bundle of soaked fabric in her arms. Inside was a little girl, no more than 3 years old, shivering, her skin pale, her lips almost purple. She wasn't crying anymore. That scared Silas the most. The others huddled close, eyes wide, scanning the small room. It was nothing fancy. A stone fireplace, a wooden table, a bed pushed against the wall, and shelves lined with dried meat, beans, and old tools. But to them, it must have looked like heaven. One of the men stepped forward. He looked older than the rest. His hair was black, but gray streaks ran through it, and his hand shook as he held a steaming cup Silas handed him. The man bowed his head and said, in broken English, "Thank you. Thank you for mercy." Silas gave a short nod. He wasn't sure what else to say. He moved quickly, pulling down thick blankets, handing out dried food, and heating a pot of water on the fire. The little girl made a small sound, half cough, half cry. It meant she was still alive. Silas closed his eyes for a second. The sound hit him hard. It reminded him too much of another child. A memory he'd buried deep, one that clawed its way back the moment that sound filled his cabin. He turned away and kept busy. The silence he'd grown used to was gone, replaced by whispers in a language he didn't understand, the rustle of wet clothes, and the soft cries of a child being warmed by fire. The older man sat beside him and spoke slowly. "Name?" "Jin Shao. These my people." He pointed to the woman with the child. "Daughter. Name Mei Chun. Girl. Ling. My granddaughter." Then he motioned to the others. "Neighbors. We all run." "Run?" Silas asked. Jin nodded. His face looked tired. "Broken. Bad men come. Burn village. Say we not belong. Say leave or die." Silas stared into the fire. He'd heard about such things. Greedy men pushing out small communities, using threats, or worse. They sent fire. Jin added, his voice lower. "We escape in dark. No time. Just run." Silas's jaw tightened. He'd chosen this place to escape the world, but it seemed the world had found its way up the mountain anyway. Something didn't sit right. This place was nearly impossible to find, and yet here they were. He looked at Jin carefully. "How did you find this cabin?" Jin hesitated. He turned and spoke quickly to the others in Chinese. Silas didn't know what was being said, but their faces changed. Nervous. Guilty. When Jin turned back, he looked down and said softly, "Old man in town. He tell us. Say follow creek, find big rocks, then climb where trees thick. Say mountain man live here. Say he help people. Say he know what it's like to run." Silas's stomach dropped. Only one man in Millfield knew those directions. Only one knew his secret. "Old man," Silas whispered. "Did he wear glasses? Talk slow, always carried a leather bag." Jin nodded. "Yes. He say you understand pain." "Doc," Silas muttered. Doc Patterson was the only person who knew the truth about why Silas had left, about what had happened to his family. Before he could ask anything else, a sound cut through the storm outside, a sound that made everyone in the cabin freeze. Dogs. Barking. Getting closer. The child stirred. Machen pulled her daughter closer, her eyes wide with fear. The others began to speak quickly, panic rising in their voices. Jin stood, already knowing what those dogs meant. "They find us," he said. "Bad men. They follow." Silas moved to the window. He peered through a crack in the shutter. Down a mountain trail, torchlight flickered in the trees. At least 6 riders. Maybe more. They were coming. Silas stepped back from the window, his face tense. The riders were still far, maybe half a mile down, but they were coming fast. The dogs barked louder now, clear and sharp, following a scent trail that led straight to his door. This wasn't a random search. These men were hunting. He turned to the group. "You can't stay in here," he said. "They'll come inside. They'll find you." Mei Chun clutched her daughter tighter. Jin looked around the cabin, his eyes searching for an answer. Silas didn't waste time. "There's a root cellar out back," he said quickly, "dug into the hill. It's hidden under firewood. You can all fit if you stay low and quiet." Jin nodded and translated. Everyone stood, ready to move, but then Jin asked, "What about you?" "I'll deal with them," Silas said. He walked over to the gun rack and pulled down his rifle. Then he opened a floorboard and took out an old tin box. Inside was something he hadn't looked at in 3 years. His badge. He held it for a moment, then pinned it to his shirt. "I'm not just some mountain man," he said. "I used to be a deputy marshal." Jin's eyes widened. Even in faraway places, the name Silas Ward meant something. Stories had spread about the lawman who tracked down the Brennan gang, the one who cleaned up 3 towns before he disappeared. "Why you leave?" Jin asked. Silas's face tightened. "Because I failed. My wife and daughter. They died because I didn't see danger in time. I couldn't save them." He checked his rifle, loaded, then grabbed his old Colt revolver and slid it into its holster. Through the shutter cracks, he could see the torchlight getting closer. He looked at them one last time. "Go. Now. Stay hidden. Don't make a sound, no matter what you hear." Jin bowed deeply. "If we live, we never forget this." "If you live," Silas said, "get to Fort Collins." Tell them Deputy Marshal Ward sent you. They'll help you." One by one, the group slipped out the back, vanishing into the storm. Silas watched the last one disappear behind the cabin. Then he turned back, stepped out onto the porch, and faced the trail. He stood tall, rifle in hand, the badge on his chest glinting in the torchlight. Minutes later, the first rider came into view. A scarred man led the group, his face lit by firelight. Behind him rode 9 others, spread out, weapons ready. They looked like hunters. Dangerous, calm, used to violence. The scarred man rode a little closer, then stopped. His eyes scanned the porch, the cabin, then landed on Silas. "That's far enough," Silas called out. His voice didn't shake. "State your business." The man rested his hand on his pistol. "Name's Clayton Reeves. We're tracking Chinese criminals. Stole property. Kill good folks. Dogs led us here." "Your dogs are wrong," Silas said. "I've been alone here for years. Ask anyone in Millfield." Reeves smiled, but there was no kindness in it. "Then you won't mind if we take a look around, just to be sure." "I would mind," Silas said, stepping forward a little. "This is private land. You're trespassing." A younger rider leaned forward in his saddle. "We're lawmen too. We got the right to track criminals." Silas scanned their faces. No badges, no papers, just the look of men who took what they wanted and hurt whoever stood in the way. "You got papers?" Silas asked calmly. "Anything proving you're legal?" Reeves's smile turned dark. "Don't need papers to deal with murderers. Step aside, old man. This doesn't concern you." Silas shifted the rifle in his hands. "Funny thing, I do have papers. I've worn this badge 12 years. And I outrank you." The men paused. Some exchanged uncertain looks. Threatening a federal marshal wasn't something to take lightly. But Reeves didn't back down. "Marshal or not," he said, "you're hiding criminals. That makes you one of them." Silas's grip on the rifle stayed firm. The air was thick, the firelight dancing across nervous faces. And from the cellar behind the cabin, 6 lives waited in silence, trusting that he would keep them safe. The air between them was still, heavy with tension. Silas stood tall, the firelight catching the edge of his badge. The wind picked up, sending sparks from the fireplace behind him up into the night. The rain had eased into a cold drizzle, but the storm wasn't over. "Not out here. Not tonight." The younger man shifted in his saddle again. "He's bluffing," he muttered to Reeves. "Look at him. He's half wild. Probably hasn't fired that rifle in years." Silas met his eyes. "You want to test that theory, son?" The rider looked away. But Reeves wasn't done. He stepped his horse forward again, just a little. "Here's what I think, Ward," he said, using Silas's name like a weapon. "I think those Chinese criminals found your hideout. I think they saw a lonely, broken man and used him. Maybe they offered you money. Maybe they talked about your family. Got into your head. Played your guilt." Silas didn't answer. He didn't move. But inside, those words cut deep. "You think protecting them makes up for what happened?" Reeves asked, voice full of poison. "Think this makes you a hero again?" "The only murderers I see," Silas said quietly, "are the men who burned down homes in the dark and chased scared families through a storm." Reeves's face changed. Just for a moment. The smile slipped, and the truth showed underneath. "They were squatting," he snapped. "Railroad owns that land. We were just clearing them out." "By fire?" Silas asked. "With guns?" In the middle of the night? Reeves didn't answer. Silas raised his voice slightly. "You just confessed to multiple crimes in front of a federal marshal." The silence that followed was thick and dangerous. Reeves's hand twitched. Too late. Silas had been waiting for that. His rifle fired first. The sound echoed through the trees like thunder. Reeves cried out and dropped from his horse, clutching his shoulder. Then the others moved. Gunfire burst across the clearing. Bullets tore through the night. Silas dove behind the wooden post on his porch, splinters flying past his face. He rolled, came up on one knee, and returned fire. His years in the wild hadn't made him slow. If anything, they'd made him sharper. 2 riders tried to swing around the cabin. No, Silas couldn't let them get behind him. Couldn't let them near the cellar. He moved fast, sprinting to the firewood pile beside the cabin. Another shot cracked past his head, too close. He ignored it. He reached cover, steadied his aim, and fired twice. Both riders fell, wounded, not dead, but out of the fight. "He's just one man," Reeve shouted from the trees. "Rush him!" 3 horses charged. Silas dropped his rifle and grabbed his revolver. The first rider came fast. Silas shot him from close range. The man flew backward, hit the ground hard. The second swung a rifle at Silas's head. Silas ducked low and shot the horse instead. It collapsed, crushing its rider under its weight with a sickening crunch. The third rider turned, tried to run. Silas shot him in the shoulder. He fell from the saddle, groaning. The clearing went quiet. Only moans from the ground, and the nervous snorts of horses still standing. 6 men were down. That left 3, Reeves and 2 more, still hidden in the trees. Silas reloaded fast, crouched low, breathing hard. "You don't have to die here," he shouted into the night. "Throw down your weapons and ride away." "Go to hell, Ward," Reeves screamed. "You think this brings your family back? You think playing the hero changes anything?" The words hit Silas like stones. For a second, he felt the weight of them, but then he remembered the child's face. Ling, warming by the fire. Mei Chen's tear-streaked cheeks. "Jinsbao." "No," Silas called back, "but it'll stop you from hurting anyone else." More shots rang out. One clipped the wood by his head. They were trying to trap him, force him down, while one of them moved in from the side. It was a smart move, but Silas had hunted men like this before. For 12 years, he'd read fear in shadows, tracked outlaws through canyons and rivers. He knew how they moved. He heard the crunch of wet leaves to his left. A flanker. Good. It meant they hadn't learned what kind of man they were fighting. It was time to remind them. Silas moved through the darkness like he was part of it. He didn't rush. He didn't make a sound. The man trying to flank him had no idea what was coming. Silas stepped carefully over wet roots, staying low, his revolver ready in his hand. Then he saw the man, about 10 feet ahead, sneaking through the trees, rifle in hand, eyes focused on the cabin. Silas stepped up behind him and pressed cold steel to the man's neck. "Drop it," he whispered. The man froze. The rifle slipped from his hands and landed in the mud. Silas grabbed the man by the collar and pulled him backwards, using his body as a shield. Then he called out to the others. "It's over, Reeves. Your boys are down. I've got your man right here. Time to make a choice." Reeves shouted back from the trees. "You won't kill him. He's unarmed." Silas didn't answer right away. He held the man still, his revolver firm. 3 years ago, Silas finally called. "You'd have been right. But I've learned something since then. Sometimes, good men have to do hard things to protect the innocent." The clearing went quiet. Rain dripped from the trees. Horses shifted on their hooves. The man in Silas's grip was breathing fast, his hands shaking. "These people you hunted," Silas continued, "they've done nothing to you. You burned their homes. You chased them through a storm. You came to my door ready to kill." He waited, letting his words settle. "Last chance," he said. "Throw down your weapons. Right away. Or I'll hunt the rest of you down one by one." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Reeves spoke again. But this time his voice was different. Beaten. Bitter. "You win this round, Ward. But those people you're protecting? They'll never be safe. There's too much money at stake." "That's not your problem anymore," Silas replied. He let the man go. "Run." The man stumbled back through the trees. Silas waited, listening as the sound of horses began to fade. They were retreating, broken, but not finished forever. He knew that. Still, for now, they were gone. He lowered his gun and walked back toward the cabin. His arm ached. A bullet had grazed him during the fight, and now that the adrenaline was wearing off, he felt it sharp and clear. The fire still burned inside. Warmth spilled through the open door. But he didn't go inside. Instead, he went around back to the pile of firewood and knocked 3 times on the hidden trapdoor. "It's safe now," he called, voice rough and tired. "They're gone." The trapdoor opened slowly. Jin's face appeared first, eyes wide and cautious. Behind him came the others, Mei Chun still clutching Ling, who was now awake and looking around, dazed but breathing. "You are hurt," Mei Chun said, seeing the blood on Silas's sleeve. "I'll live," he said, "but you can't stay here." Jin nodded. "They come back. They will, with more men. This place, it's not safe anymore." Where do we go? Jin asked. Silas looked out across the valley. Dawn was coming, painting gold over the mountains. For 3 years he had stayed here, hidden from the world. But now, standing with these people, he knew that time was over. Fort Collins, he said. I'll take you there myself. I know people. They'll help you get west. Jin looked surprised. You come with us? I can't protect you from here, Silas said. And I'm done hiding. He turned back to the cabin. So much had changed in just one night. But something inside him felt lighter. Not healed. Not yet. But different. He had a job to do. One that mattered. They didn't waste time. Silas helped the group pack what little they had. He gave them extra blankets, food, and boots from his old supplies. The little girl, Ling, was still weak, but she held on her mother's neck as Mei Chun wrapped her tightly in wool. Jin moved slowly, still sore from the journey and the fear, but his eyes were steady now. He trusted Silas. They all did. By the time the sun was fully up, the storm had cleared. The sky above the mountain was bright and cold. The trail ahead would not be easy. Silas knew the land well, but with wounded people and a child, the trip to Fort Collins would take 2 days, maybe more. Before leaving, Silas stood on the porch one last time and looked at his cabin. It had been his safe place, his prison, and his hiding spot for 3 years. He had built it to forget the world. But now it felt small, too small for what needed to come next. He didn't feel regret, just quiet acceptance. As they made their way down the narrow path into the trees, Silas led the way. The others followed close, staying quiet. The forest was still wet from the night's storm, and every branch held the weight of water. Birds chirped overhead. Somewhere in the distance, a deer moved through the brush. Hours passed in silence. They moved carefully. Silas kept his eyes on the trail, but his ears stayed sharp. He was watching for danger, not just from Reeves' men, but from the wild itself. Bears, wolves, sudden drops. This mountain wasn't friendly. That evening, they made camp beside a creek. Silas started a small fire in a hollow between rocks and kept the flames low. He shared jerky and boiled beans. Ling had a little, and Silas gave her a sip of coffee thinned with water. She wrinkled her nose at the taste, and for the first time, she smiled a little. That smile did something to Silas. It tugged at something deep, something he thought was dead. He looked away, pretending to check the fire, but inside his chest ached. Machen noticed. She sat beside him while the others rested nearby. You have daughter? She asked softly. Silas stared into the flames. I did. I'm sorry. He nodded, but didn't speak. Machen held Ling tighter. She looked like her? Silas didn't answer right away. Then he said, her name was Anna. She loved drawing horses. Used to sit on my lap and scribble on every piece of paper I brought home. Machen smiled. Ling like rabbits. She chased them. Never catch. That made Silas chuckle softly. A real sound, not just breath. Silence stretched between them, but it wasn't heavy. It was shared. Then Jin came over and sat on Silas's other side. Why you stop being Marshal? He asked. Silas rubbed his hands together. Because I made a mistake. One that cost me everything. Jin looked out at the trees. We all make mistakes. But you help us. That means something. Silas didn't reply, but his heart felt full of things he hadn't let himself feel in years. Pain, yes, but also purpose. Later that night, when everyone was asleep, Silas sat alone by the dying fire. The stars above were bright and sharp. He looked up at them and thought about the choices he'd made, about the badge he now carried again. He had once believed he didn't deserve to wear it, that it reminded him of failure. But now, sitting beside people who trusted him, who had nothing else, he wondered if maybe that badge could mean something different. Not about power, but about responsibility. By morning, the group was on the move again. The forest felt quieter now, lighter. The sun broke through the trees in thin golden lines, and the air was crisp. Silas kept his rifle slung across his shoulder and led them down narrow paths, only he seemed to know. He moved with the confidence of a man who had walked these woods for years. The others followed in silence, placing their feet where he stepped, trusting him with their lives. Ling rode in Jin's arms for a while, then in Mei Chen's. The little girl was still weak, but her cheeks had some color now, and she looked around with wide eyes. She didn't speak, but she kept watching Silas. Every time he turned to check on the group, she met his gaze. And each time, he saw something in her eyes, something that made his chest tighten. A strange kind of peace, or maybe belief. They rested near midday, beneath a large rock ledge. Silas scanned the trail behind them, always alert. He hadn't seen signs of Reeves's gang, but that didn't mean they were safe. Those men wouldn't give up so easily. There was too much pride and money in what they were chasing. As the others shared a quiet meal, Jin sat next to Silas again. "We almost there?" he asked. "Another day. Maybe two. If we're careful," Silas said. "Once we hit the main road, I'll wave down a wagon or ride ahead town. Fort Collins is safe. I've got friends there." Jin nodded, his eyes tired but hopeful. "We make it because of you." Silas looked down. "I just did what needed doing." Jin touched his shoulder gently. "Sometimes that is hardest thing." They moved on after an hour of rest. The trail got steeper, the rocks loose. Silas helped Ling across a narrow log bridge, then turned back to help Mei Chun. She hesitated, looked at him, then placed her hand in his. Their eyes met briefly. No words, just something shared in silence. Later, as they moved through a shadowy part of the forest, they heard the sound again. Horses. Close. Silas raised his hand, stopping everyone. The hoofbeats were faint but real. Coming from behind. Not a lot of them. Maybe two, maybe three riders. "Hide," Silas whispered. They slipped behind thick trees, crouched low. Silas knelt near a fallen log, rifle aimed. The others stayed silent, just like he taught them. Two riders came into view down the slope. Not Reeves. Younger men. One looked nervous. The other scanned the trail with sharp eyes. "Trail's fresh," the second rider said. "Tracks headed north." "Think he's still with them?" the first asked. "Don't know. Reeves said Ward might try to take them down." Then they turned and rode off in the direction the group had come from, likely trying to cut ahead, or maybe circle around. Silas didn't breathe until their hoofbeats faded. Then he turned to the others. "We move now. Fast and quiet." They kept going until dark, pushing through thick brush and cold streams. Silas knew of a small hunter shelter near the edge of the forest, a place he'd built years ago, just in case. It wasn't much, but it had a roof and a dry floor. That night, they all slept huddled close. Even Silas, though he didn't mean to. He sat with his back against the wall, rifle across his lap, but sometime after midnight, his head dropped and his body gave in. He woke to a soft sound. Ling. She had crawled over and rested her head on his leg, fast asleep. Silas stared at her, unsure what to do. Then Mei Chun whispered from the dark, "She likes you." Silas swallowed hard. "I don't know why." "She sees truth," Mei Chun said softly. "Even little ones know when someone cares." Silas placed a hand gently on the girl's back. She was warm, breathing steady. In that quiet moment, Silas realized something. He had stopped running. He had found something to protect again. The sun was barely rising when they reached the edge of the forest. The trees thinned, opening to a wide stretch of dry grass and a dirt road winding toward the horizon. Far in the distance, smoke curled gently from chimneys. Fort Collins. A real town. Safety. A place where nobody would be hunted for the color of their skin or the language they spoke. Silas stopped at the edge of the tree line, the others crowding close behind him. Ling leaned against his side, holding his sleeve. Jin stood beside him, eyes wet with relief. "We made it," Mei Chun whispered. Silas nodded slowly. "Almost." They walked together toward the road. Just before they reached it, a wagon appeared over the hill. A strong old mule pulled it, and a kind-looking woman in a bonnet sat at the reins. Her eyes widened when she saw them. Silas stepped forward first. "We got sick and injured," he said calmly. "They're refugees. They need help. They need a safe place." The woman studied them for a moment, then looked at the badge on his chest. "Your law." "Oh," as Silas said. "Now, I'm doing what's right." She didn't ask more. She nodded, moved over on the wagon bench, and helped them load in. Ling sat in Silas's lap, her small hands curled around his coat. He held her gently, quietly. The others rested against each other, exhausted but calm. They rode into Fort Collins just after noon. Silas took them to the local marshal's office first. He knew the man in charge, a young officer with a sharp mind and a good heart. He explained everything. The burned village. The men who hunted them. What Reese had said. What Silas had done. No one doubted his word. Later, he brought Jin and the others to a church-run shelter. It was warm, quiet, and full of fresh beds and food. Mei Chun thanked him in soft, trembling words. Ling hugged him around the neck and didn't want to let go. Jin bowed deeply, the same way he had that first night. But this time, it wasn't for mercy. It was respect. Silas stood at the door for a long time, watching them settle inside. Then he turned and walked down the dusty street, past shops and voices and the life he had once given up. The weight of the rifle across his shoulder was familiar, but it didn't feel heavy anymore. And the badge over his heart? For the first time in years, it felt like it belonged there again. A voice called out behind him. He turned. It was the young marshal. "You sticking around, Ward?" Silas paused. "Yeah," he said. "I think I am." The wind rolled softly through the town. He looked out toward the west, where the mountains stood tall and wild. For a long time, he had hidden in them, tried to run from pain, from duty, from himself. But no man can hide forever. In the end, it wasn't revenge or justice that pulled Silas back. It was kindness. It was a little girl's hand holding his coat. It was the chance to do one thing right when the world offered him the chance. And that's the lesson he carried forward. You can't change the past, but you can choose who you are today. And sometimes, helping others is the first step to saving yourself.